Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 185 based on novel. So let's start. Our sacred cult's new cult master, Sai Yuanwei, said heedlessly. His position of cult master didn't come properly. It was actually not fought for but passed down. How embarrassing. Something like that actually happened. Cult master Hu Jun's face turned cold and he sneered. Of course, each age brings forth a new genius on this noble land, and each generation is worse than the previous. The men of today have sadly degenerated, and even a sacred cult master's position is no longer even fought for. Do you have a firm hold of your empire? Qin Mu remained patient. Fellow cult masters, I was supported by the hall masters of 360 halls and the protectors and the heavenly kings. Only then did I ascend to the position of the cult master. Truth be told, the sacred cult has flourished more and more in my hands and far surpasses the past. Big words. Another few past cult masters walked over, and a handsome man sneered when he heard his words. Flourished more and more. I've heard that Eternal Peace Empire is the one in power now in the world of the living. It has annexed the world, so how are you making the sacred cult flourish? Are you going to betray the cult to seek glory, allowing the emperor to become the cult master? Qin Mu held back his anger and smiled. Who is this? The handsome man spread open his folded fan and said, You have not gone to Hall of Yu Guang on my Saint Arrival Mountain. I'm Cult Master Yu Guang. Qin Mu laughed loudly and said, I've never paid my respects to the rotten woods in the halls before. On Saint Arrival Mountain, I only respect Woodcutter, Founding Master, and also the Three Kings. Other cult masters in my eyes are merely flies, and not worthy of my respect. How daring. Another few cult masters came forward and Qin Mu looked over. All of the people were all handsome men and pretty women. It created an obvious difference between Heavenly Devil Cult and Hall of Human Emperors. No matter if it was men or women, anyone could be a human emperor in Hall of Human Emperors since they didn't care about their looks, letting their complexions grow old. They would rarely preserve their youth. But the cult masters of Heavenly Saint Cult were different. Great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures had 7 writings of creation, and cultivating them could allow one to preserve their looks forever. They could even return their appearance back to when they were youths. Qin Mu looked at the sacred cult masters. They were mostly young men and women who looked beautiful. Even the young patriarch looked young and paid attention to his appearance. Little cult master also most likely didn't pay his respects to me, Feng Qiangu in Hall of Qiangu, right? Cult master Qiangu walked forward and sneered. Your position of the cult master was passed down, and not snatched using your own strength. Your origin is improper, and you still dare say that we are flies and don't deserve respect. What do you have that deserves our respect? That's right. You are illegitimately conferred, so how do you have the face to visit us and meet your ancestors? You don't even respect the rules of the sacred cult, and show no respect to us, your ancestors. Aren't you deceiving the master and destroying your ancestors at such a young age? Little cult master. This continued for a while. Silence. Qin Mu shouted in anger when he could no longer take it. The surroundings became quiet. Qin Mu laughed loudly and unfolded his robes to both sides while saying loudly, When I succeeded the position, the followers' livelihood had been close to destitution, and there were many things waiting to be done. This was the mess that the previous cult master, Li Qianxing, had left for me. After stepping into my position, I reformed the merits and drawbacks, allying us with eternal peace to expel Buddhism, and inflict serious damage on Dao sect, causing these 2 big sacred grounds to concede defeat. I changed the laws and cleared the way, expanded the teachings, set up school hall, founded Heavenly Saint Academy, gathered the paths, skills, and divine arts of all sects and cults in the world to correct the reputation of my cult. I've founded the 18th sword form and established the primordial spirit in 6 directions. The men of my cult are now located prominently in the 10,000 miles from the east to the west. The highest one is Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the lowest ones are commoners and pawns. In all levels of society, there are people of our cult. With my cultivation of 7 stars realm, I've already achieved this much. He looked around the past sacred cult masters of Heavenly Devil cult and sneered. What about you guys? Under your hands, the sacred cult had fallen into the devil path, and was called Heavenly Devil cult, being scolded and dismissed by everyone. What is called the path of the saint is none other than the everyday use of common people. Yet you had taken a perfectly fine path of the saint and refined it into the path of the devil, turning it into the devil cult. A saint has to establish his virtue, his merit, and his ideas in writing, so what have you guys done? I respect Saint Woodcutter for imparting his scriptures on the rock and imparting skills to all ages. I respect Founding Master for expounding the wisdom of an ancient sage, founding a cult and establish his ideas in writing. I respect the 3 cult masters of Hall of 3 Kings, who sacrificed themselves in moments of danger to preserve the inheritance. But what about you guys? Qin Mu sneered. What merit have you established? What virtue? What ideas? Misinterpreting the teachings, cultivating devil techniques, making Heavenly Saint cult have to carry the reputation of a devil cult. How do I have the face to meet the ancestors? Have the merits you guys established been as big as a finger of mine? Are you guys qualified to be cult masters? Qualified to be sacred teachers? I'm not here to find you guys, since you guys are mediocre, and don't even possess the face to meet me. The surroundings went silent. The sacred cult masters of Heavenly Saint cult were even more numerous than the human emperors of Hall of Human Emperors, but most of them had died miserably, so their cultivations hadn't been high enough to enter Fengdu, thus the number of sacred cult masters in Fengdu wasn't that much higher. Even so, there were close to 30 cult masters gathered, and they were another huge force in Fengdu that few people dared to provoke. Qin Mu's long speech had blown everyone's mind, and the situation had grown terrifyingly cold. Suddenly, the young patriarch's voice reached them. What's happening? Everyone's here. I'm late. Qin Mu looked over and saw cold sweat on the young patriarch's forehead. He was hurrying over with the large skeleton of Dragon Qilin following closely behind him. The young patriarch hurried over and squeezed into the crowd. The cold sweat on his forehead grew as he chuckled. Cult masters, how did a simple talk escalate into a quarrel? This is the current Heavenly Saint cult master, outstanding talent in the present age that holds to the teachings on the rocks. Cult Master Qin is here to find me, so let's go, come to my place for a seat. The disciples of the sacred cult had burned quite some good things for me. The Heavenly Devil cult masters in the surroundings were motionless. Cold sweat rolled down young patriarch's forehead, as he tugged onto Qin Mu's clothes. He gritted his teeth and said, "Your words are too ruthless. Lower your head and apologize to the ancestors." Apologize? There's no need for that. Cult Master Zhu Yang laughed loudly and said leisurely, Cult Master Qin's small body could actually explode with such astonishing words that were so loud that even the deaf could hear. We were all stunned. The young patriarch's expression changed slightly. Cult Master Zhu Yang seemed to be angered, for the more pleasant his smile was, the greater was his fury. Qin Mu smiled and said, Cult Master Zhu Yang is trying to imply something, so why won't he speak his mind? The young patriarch was very anxious, while Cult Master Zhu Yang just smiled. The Cult Master of Heavenly Saint cult should be good in a fight, and not talk with a glib mouth. Your position of the cult master was attained improperly, but since Li Qianxing is already dead, why don't we old bones substitute him to test you? Let's see if you have the right to be the cult master sacred teacher. The young patriarch hurriedly tugged on the corner of Qin Mu's shirt, signaling for him to reject. To fight on the same realm. Truth be told, I just beat everyone in Hall of Human Emperors. Qin Mu gently pushed his hand away, and said with a smile, all the human emperors of Hall of Human Emperors are top-notch figures, and fighting them was tiring. As for fellow past cult masters, if we are fighting on the same realm, his voice grew indifferent. Come up all at once. The sweat rolled down young patriarch's forehead like rain. The expressions of the past cult masters changed drastically, and cult master Yu Lian chuckled. Cult master Qin is enthusiastic, but for us to go all together, aren't you too haughty? For example, let me first test cult master Qin's methods. Qin Mu shook his head. Your realm isn't enough. One realm as one heaven, one frame of mind as one pass. I stand on top of the pass while looking at all of you, seeing everything clearly. I'm asking all of you guys to come together, because I'm respectful of the elderly. If cult master Yu Lian wants to fight me alone, wouldn't you be overestimating yourself? The young patriarch sighed and took in a long breath, before saying solemnly, Cult master sacred teachers, you have to keep your promises when you speak. Everyone seal your celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge, these three great divine treasures. As for whether you guys want to fight alone or go together, it's all up to you guys. Anyway, I'm not the sacred cult master, so just do what you like. Cult master Yu Lian was the first to seal his three great divine treasures and take a step forward. With a shout, his devil technique burst forth. His great educational heavenly devil scriptures walked down the devil path, and he was truly a great master of the devil path. He had comprehended the paths, skills, and divine arts in great educational heavenly devil scriptures to the extremes of the devil path. Taking one step was a series of specters. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures are merely an incomplete writing of my overlord body 3 elixir technique, yet it was still refined into the devil path by you. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and struck out with a palm. He was fast as lightning in hitting the specters. Great overarching heavenly stars palm force. Boom. Cult master Yu Lian flew back and created a human-shaped hole in Hall of Zhu Yang. Next, a series of rumbles rang out from the hall. Cult master Yu Lian had crashed through over a dozen walls and still couldn't stop. Finally, a mushroom cloud appeared 10 miles away. It was impossible to say how many things he had hit before coming to a stop. Everyone was yet to come back to their senses when Qin Mu moved and came to the back of cult master Zhu Yang. The man's reaction was extremely fast, and he pounced forward, transforming into a shadow that stuck to the floor. Qin Mu stomped the floor, and the ground split apart, creating a deep ditch. Cult master Zhu Yang's true body was shaken out from the black shadow form, and a knife slashed down straight at his face. He shouted in anger, and black tortoise body appeared. The huge shield split when it met the knife, and he got blown away with two halves of the broken shield. Qin Mu rushed into the group of the past cult masters, and moved around like a phantom. Everyone was astonished, but they didn't waste time before retaliating upon sensing his attacks. Bang, bang, bang. A series of explosions rang out when cult master Yu Guang's divine art hit Feng Qiangu's body, and Feng Qiangu's devil sword stabbed into Sai Yuanwei's chest. In an instant, everyone was in a mess. The young patriarch immediately moved back to avoid being caught by the fray. He then saw the ground splitting and shattering. The entire hall of Zhu Yang broke into pieces under the attacks of numerous divine arts, and the broken hall floated into the sky. Everyone was leaping around the debris. Their heads were sometimes up and sometimes down. Sometimes they were shadows on some pillar, and sometimes they transformed into flying or jumping beasts. What you used is Tao sword of Tao sect, you traitor. A past cult master roared angrily as he suffered hundreds of swords. He then collapsed headfirst. Scoundrel, this is Great Thunderclap Monastery's technique. This is the divine art of Little Jade Capital. What sword skill is this? Bang, bang, bang. Figures fell down, while the shattered palace rose higher and higher. On the glazed tiles and the vermilion rafters, Qin Mu and Cult Master Hu Jun's bodies crossed. Qin Mu used secrets of seal word to seal the 5 senses of his opponents. He then turned around and used yin-yang heaven flipping hands, and with a raise and lowering of his palm, he made Cult Master Hu Jun puke blood as he fell. The glazed tiles of the huge hall split apart, as Cult Master Yang Ji came over. But what welcomed him was a huge divine art from Qin Mu, celestial cave and Milky Way hanging from jade heaven. The 10,000 stars brought a terrifying palm force to descend from the sky, breaking through Cult Master Yang Ji's divine art like it was rotten wood. Qin Mu's palm ruthlessly smacked him down to the ground with a Milky Way. Boom. In the air, numerous crumbling fences and dilapidated walls fell down, and the ground shook violently. Where numerous heavenly devil cult masters had landed, there was a huge palm that had an area of 3 to 5 fields. Weak old thieves, unable to withstand a single blow. Qin Mu landed on the ground and dusted off his clothes. He looked at the dumbfounded young patriarch and smiled. Patriarch, let's go to your place for a talk. Hall of Wen Yuan was young patriarch's place, and it was much shabbier than the halls of the cult masters. This was probably because patriarch had never been a cult master before, and his status was much lower than that of the cult masters. However, in Qin Mu's eyes, it was also because the young patriarch had never been the cult master sacred teacher, that he could drop the baggage and achieve things that those cult masters had never done. The young patriarch and eternal peace imperial preceptor were half teacher and student and half friends. When eternal peace imperial preceptor came to visit him, he took the initiative to show him great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and also told him about the general teachings of the path of the saint. He then personally wrote a letter to recommend that young man to Tao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's huge achievements were related to him by a lot too. Afterward, when Eternal Peace started his reform, it was also related to the young patriarch. Even the founding of Imperial College also had very deep relations with him. He was the first Grand Chancellor of Imperial College, and when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor carried out his reform, he would frequently seek his opinion. Eternal Peace had 3 big players in the reform. The 2 big players, Imperial Preceptor and Emperor, were out in the open while the young patriarch was the 3rd big player hidden behind their backs. Just based on achievements, in the entire history of the sacred cult, there was at most 2-3 other people who could match up to the achievements of the young patriarch. Yet because he wasn't the cult master, he didn't receive the treatment of the other cult masters, and this made Qin Mu felt grief for him. You still haven't changed your temper. The young patriarch brought Qin Mu into the hall while the huge bones and scales of a dragon Qilin kept rubbing against him. It was to the point that the young patriarch's clothes were already torn and his leg had turned bright red. Yet he acted like it was nothing and said to Qin Mu, "What now? All the past cult masters have been beaten up by you. Do you think they are easy to get along with? They are a force in Fengdu. After you die of old age, how are you going to stand in Fengdu?" Patriarch, Qin Mu suddenly hugged him tightly as his voice shook slightly. He didn't let him go even after a long time. "I missed you." The skeleton boy wanted to wipe his tears, but there were no tears to be wiped. He choked as he said, "I didn't know you were blocking off the gods of high heavens in great ruins, and only heard about it later from Sai Yinxiang. Elder of Discipline brought your ashes back, but I wasn't able to meet you one last time. So I'm here to see you now. I kept hiding it from Fatty Dragon, not daring to tell him, but I couldn't any longer. The young patriarch was stunned. He patted the youth's back and sighed ruefully. I'm only living elsewhere. Look, I still have flesh and blood. In my eyes, you guys are the dead ones, so should I cry miserably too? There. Cult Master Qin was so fierce when scolding and beating up all the ancestors, so why are you acting like a small child now? Enough, Dragon Qilin, my leg is bleeding from your rubs. Haven't you rubbed enough? The Dragon Qilin wanted to stick his tongue out to help him lick his injury, but he then remembered that he had no tongue. He then reluctantly retreated. But after a moment, he couldn't resist coming up to rub himself against the leg again. The young patriarch was speechless. He had not met the Dragon Qilin for a long time, so when they first met, they even cried a whole lot because they had been close before. But as that fatty dragon kept rubbing against his leg, he was starting to get really annoyed. In a moment, there was nothing he wanted more than to send that fellow far away. I've thought about meeting Saint Woodcutter, who had imparted his teachings on the rock and also founding master, as well as the three kings, Qin Mu said. Patriarch, are they also in Fengdu? You can't see the three sacred kings anymore, their souls have dispersed, the young patriarch said sorrowfully. They died in battle while forcing themselves to impart the teachings on the rock to the next cult master, so they couldn't protect their own souls and enter Fengdu. I thought I would meet founding master here as well, but I've not seen him. Saint Woodcutter is not here too. Qin Mu was stunned. Besides Fengdu, where else could Saint Woodcutter and founding master have gone? The stone statue of Woodcutter's corporeal body still stood in Little Jade Capital, looking toward great ruins. His primordial spirit had left his body and went to other places. After founding master established his cult and set his ideas in writing, he had not established merit, so he still wasn't a saint. He shouldn't have been a god as well, so he would have died of old age. Where could he have gone then? The young patriarch hesitated and said, You beat up the past cult masters. Patriarch, I'm a cult master, and they are also cult masters, so why should I be lower than them? I'm still a human emperor too, so my status is even above theirs. If you want me to talk to them nicely, I can't do it, Qin Mu said. The sacred cult has no seniority, and the one who discovers the truth should be the teacher. Even though they are the past cult masters, they also have their own strength of character. If I didn't beat them, they would say that my cult master title was not attained properly. After beating them, they were speechless. Besides, the sacred cult in their hands had no achievements and their way is corrupted, so they deserved to be beaten. The young patriarch sighed and asked curiously, You don't have your corporeal body, so how did you use your magic power? I've come here once with village chief, and it was then that I realized that me turning into a skeleton was merely an illusion. Since it was an illusion, my corporeal body disappearing and you guys coming back to life is also an illusion. Grandpa Blind's divine eyes allowed me to see through everything in Fengdu, and it was from then on that I could use magic power and divine arts in Fengdu. I can sense my own corporeal body. Patriarch, you don't know this, but in my eyes. Boundless sorrow flooded his heart, and he didn't continue to speak. In front of his divine eyes, Patriarch, who was living perfectly fine, was only a skeleton. When Qin Mu walked in Fengdu City, that was all he saw. Everyone walking to and fro in the bustling city of Fengdu were all skeletons and ghosts. Only he was moving through the city with a corporeal body. He was a lonely soul, isolated and alone. Even when he talked cheerfully with the past human emperors in Sacred Hall of Five Yang, he had only been talking with dozens of skeletons. Only within between life and death did he saw the past human emperors gain flesh and blood. This was the sight Qin Mu saw when he used the divine eyes blind had imparted to him. His sight was completely different from the sight the ghosts in Fengdu saw. In the living realm, life and death were reversed, but patriarch, the past human emperors, and the past cult masters were still dead. Qin Mu didn't say all of this. He was silent for a moment before smiling. Patriarch, you, imperial preceptor, and the emperor are in charge of the reform. Now that you're here, how will the reform continue on? The young patriarch walked side by side with him to prevent the dragon Qilin from coming up again. He smiled and said, "The path of the reform has already started and it won't end. What imperial preceptor is reforming are the traditions, the slave nature, the fights between sects, so that the divine arts practitioners in the world need not fight for the sects anymore and exhaust their own power for nothing. It is also to change the individual mindset of the sects, to let divine arts practitioners work for the people and serve them. This is the great idea and the great framework." He came to the back garden of Hall of Wen Yuan and handed a pair of shears to Qin Mu. He also took one for himself and trimmed the sprays carefully. The most important thing about the reform is that it changes the bad habits in the hearts of people, pushing down the god statues within them. Destroying gods in people's hearts is not something divine arts practitioners have to do, but something the whole world has to do. If everyone could destroy the God and Buddha in their hearts, this would become a world of prosperity. Qin Mu trimmed the sprays and turned a blossom into a hen dragon without feathers. When the young patriarch finished speaking, he stopped and pondered his words before nodding. The people of the world pray to the gods and Buddhas for wind, rain, and a bountiful harvest, for their family to prosper and have lots of children. If the divine arts practitioners could fulfill their wishes, it could indeed assist in breaking the gods in their hearts. The young patriarch looked at the flowers and plants that were messily trimmed by him and shifted his gaze after a moment. "I've said it to Imperial Preceptor before, that to break the gods in the hearts, he'll first need to reform the economy. It will improve the statecraft and aid the people. When the economy is open, the knowledge of the people will be opened. To put it in simple words, when divine arts practitioners will use their divine arts to help the farmers harvest their crops, the farmers will pay them, and with the money received, they'll buy food or resources they need for cultivation. This money would then return to the people's hands. They all have to pay taxes to the empire, so the empire would grow wealthy. When the empire is wealthy, it can open more traffic and irrigation works, which are all for the convenience and benefit of the people. Thus, when the empire is wealthy, people are wealthy, when people are wealthy, the resources are abundant. Divine arts practitioners will be able to buy all kinds of resources, and their cultivations would naturally far surpass the past. The people would become strong, and the empire would become strong. Qin Mu was enthralled, but he suddenly heard footsteps. When he turned back to look, he saw Cult Master Zhu Yang, Cult Master Yu Lian, Cult Master Sai Yuan Wei, and the rest entering Hall of Wen Yuan with murderous intent. Heavenly devil cult's past cult masters didn't make a move, but instead stopped and listened. Common folk has been slaves of influential families for too long, and they now have the nature of slaves. Once you kneel down, it's hard to get up. Imperial Preceptor is now making the people stand up, but this requires time. Still, the reform has been moving slowly. The people now no longer kneel to divine arts practitioners. The young patriarch's thoughts were full of the reform, and he didn't realize the arrival of guests. He reminisced about the past. "I've seen the situation before the reform. At that time, the sects and cults stood in numbers, and the farmers slogged their lives out. They had to kneel and call them old masters, offering up meat and rations. To change this kind of slave nature, Imperial Preceptor and I used some 200 years. Once the people stand up, it's also very hard for them to kneel back down." Qin Mu remembered the incident where people knelt in front of the stone statues that had popped out from the earth. They still kneel to god statues. The young patriarch's expression grew a little weird. Imperial Preceptor said that it's easy to break the God in the temple, but it's hard to break the God in the heart. To me, it's not easy to break the God in the temple as well. I've done a small experiment once to test the heart of the people. I built a small temple outside the capital and enlightened a dirty mangy dog, then made it sit on the shrine. Can you guess what happened? He sighed and said, after a few days, the mangy dog's temple was flourishing with incense, and there were countless old men and old women coming forth to give offerings. The virtue box in front of the mangy dog was stuffed with money. If you put a toad on the shrine, not even a mangy dog, people would still stuff it with money and offer incense. Qin Mu laughed, but as he continued, he slowly couldn't laugh anymore. That's why we need to open the economy and wizen the people. Only then could we break the gods in the temples and the God in the hearts, the young patriarch said. And to wizen the people, we need you guys to continue with the reform to increase the number of divine arts practitioners. They need to become more common and become gods. When divine arts practitioners that become gods continue to serve the people will no longer pray to the gods in the temples. With the new wisdom, there will only be more divine arts practitioners. He then added, opening the economy, wisening the people is all part of the path of reform. What you guys are doing now is very good. Divine arts are being used for the people, but time is still required for the people gain wisdom and not kneel to the gods in the temples anymore. This journey is arduous, and it will first touch the benefits of the sects, before touching the benefits of the high gods. High heavens are only the dogs of the high gods, so there is probably an even greater danger behind. He trimmed the sprays as he said, the reform of Imperial Preceptor has added 3 more forms to the sword skills, and began the change of the paths and skills in the heaven and earth. You spreading the technique to become God by mending the divine bridge has pushed the reform another step ahead. Sai Yinxiang had offered incense and prayed to me, telling me that you and Princess Yuxiu founded the skill of awakening 6 directions primordial spirit. Numerous divine arts practitioners in Eternal Peace Empire had done their bit to help on the foundation, and have by now created numerous techniques and divine arts. These are all great deeds. He straightened his back. With the paths, skills, and divine arts improving day after day, there will be more and more gods in Eternal Peace Empire. In time, the gods in the temples will be broken, and when that happens, we won't be far from breaking the gods in their hearts. Qin Mu's mind trembled, and he threw down the shears. He did a long bow to the ground. Patriarch is truly the sacred teacher of my heavenly saint cult. The young patriarch also hurriedly threw away his shears and helped him up with a smile. You are the cult master sacred teacher of our cult, so how could you call me sacred teacher? Quickly get up. At that moment, all the past cult masters in the surroundings bowed lowly to the ground and said in unison, Sacred teacher. The young patriarch only noticed them now and was at a loss. Sacred teacher is a saint who's a teacher. All the past cult masters aren't deserving to be called the sacred teacher. Only you are worthy of this title, and worthy of the respect of all the past cult masters. The young patriarch was flustered, various emotions flooding his heart. He couldn't help the tears that flowed down his face. He had never been a cult master before, and was always excluded outside the circle of power in Heavenly Saint cult. He had only carried the burden of Heavenly Saint cult when it was in trouble. That was why he had never even dreamed that he would be like Saint Woodcutter, receiving respect from all the past cult masters. The only one who was worthy of all the cult masters' respect was only Saint Woodcutter, who imparted his teachings on the rock. Now then I know the aspiration and abilities of Wen Yuan far surpasses those of us, the cult masters. In the back garden of Hall of Wen Yuan, the previous cult masters all stood up and Sai Yuan Wei sighed ruefully. She suddenly remembered something and asked, "Why did I take you in as a disciple back then? I suddenly feel that my judgment was actually so good." The young patriarch blushed and said, "When Master took me in as a disciple, you said I looked pretty, and my aptitude was good. Of course, that important part was that I was pretty." Qin Mu examined his surroundings, and the people around him were all handsome men and pretty women. The past cult masters of Heavenly Devil Cult, including the young patriarch, none of them looked angry at the words. Sai Yuanwei blushed slightly while smiling. "I remember now. I took you in as a disciple with a plan to use you to break my Tao heart with the affairs between man and woman. My great educational Heavenly Devil scripture mainly cultivated the heart, and I had broken my master's Tao heart, this way taking the position of the cult master. I needed a person who could break my Tao heart. Without destruction there can be no construction. If you could break my Tao heart, you would become the cult master. If you couldn't, I would be able to take another step forward and might just become a god or devil. However, since I kept putting my guard against you, Cult Master Yu Lian managed to take advantage of my inattention in regards to him and assassinated me." Cult Master Yu Lian sounded pleased with himself as he said, "Master only guarded against your affection for little junior brother, but you didn't know it's hard to guard against an attack by a hidden enemy. How old was little junior brother then? You kept being concerned about it, but if you didn't have such thoughts and had guarded against me more, little junior brother might have become the sacred cult master." Qin Mu pondered over it. The devil in Heavenly Devil Cult's name could probably be related to this continued tradition between masters and their disciples. This kind of style of master letting the disciple assassinate oneself couldn't not be called evil. It was like Li Qianxing. When he was assassinated by Granny Sai, she was only on celestial being realm, so she absolutely couldn't have used her true strength to kill Li Qianxing, who was already on divine bridge realm. Yet Li Qianxing had given her this chance. The fights between masters and disciples of Heavenly Devil Cult should have originated from founding master, whose motive was to make one generation stronger than the previous one. So he had established the rule that when a disciple defeated their master, they could become Heavenly Devil Cult master. However, this kind of rule had gradually changed. With the strangeness of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, it was easy to give birth to the devil nature. As a result, the rule that looked very good on paper had gradually changed to what it was now. The young patriarch smiled and said, "If I had become the sacred cult master, I would most likely have become like everyone, worrying about the benefits of Heavenly Saint Cult and not the people of the world. Not being the cult master had instead made me whole." All the past cult master nodded in agreement. As for cult master Qin, Sai Yuanwei turned to look at Qin Mu and stood silent for a moment. "We won't argue about how your position of the cult master wasn't attained properly. After you've become the cult master, you've done well, but if it was us, we could have also done well." Qin Mu was humble. "This is natural. All the previous cult masters are dragons and phoenixes among humans, so if you were in my position, you would definitely do even better than me. It's just that when you guys were in my position, you guys did nothing." The faces of all the past cult master twitched, and their expressions flickered between dark and clear as they fought back the urge to get rid of him. The brat was fearless, but he was the sacred cult master too. He carried the important responsibility of passing down his position and the teachings on the rock, so if they got rid of him, Heavenly Devil Cult would be finished. I was impolite just now, since I felt indignant that seniors are using wrong and outdated rules to limit the later generation, so I offended all of you. I hereby apologize to all the past cult masters, Qin Mu said. The expressions of the cult masters softened, and cult master Zhu Yang immediately helped him up with a smile. "Little cult master Qin has done what we didn't do, and that makes us admire you endlessly. Among the past cult masters, even if you can't rank in the top 3, you could still rank in the top 5. People say everything is empty after death, and we won't bear any grudge, just because of a small quarrel. Cult Master Hu Jun smiled and said, "Other than admiring your attainments in cultivation, we are more worried that after you go back, you won't let the cult followers burn offering for us every New Year and festive occasions." "You're right, extremely right." Everyone laughed and said, "We don't want to become like those poverty-stricken people from Hall of Human Emperor. They don't even have a person to burn offerings for them. The current Human Emperor of Hall of Human Emperor is really unfilial, not giving any offering every New Year and on festive occasions. Look at how glorious the human emperors were when they were alive, and look at how poor they are now. How are they like us, glorious when we are alive and glorious even after death?" Everyone laughed loudly, and the young patriarch also gave a few chuckles. But he then suddenly remembered Qin Mu and immediately glanced at him. Qin Mu also gave a few dry laughs. Luckily he had no face now, or he would have definitely blushed. The past cult masters of Heavenly Devil cult didn't know his other identity was the current human emperor, and that the past human emperors were so poor, because he didn't give any offerings. After returning to eternal peace, I must take a trip to Hall of Human Emperors and allow the past human emperors live wealthily. They can't be too poor. He set a new resolve in his heart. Cult Master Qin, the young patriarch said with a righteous expression, "You have come to meet me, so what are you going to do after returning to the world of the living?" Everyone's laugh stopped, and they all looked at him to see how he would answer. Qin Mu was solemn for a moment before smiling. "After returning to Eternal Peace Empire, I will first open roads." "Open roads?" The young patriarch frowned and said, "It's true that the traffic and roads make it convenient for the people to travel, but the cost is also great. Eternal Peace Empire has gone through numerous battles and the treasury is empty. You regard the lives of people as important, so why would you open the roads first? The roads of Eternal Peace Empire are already good, so if you open more now, won't it be a waste of manpower and resources?" Qin Mu sighed ruefully. "This is because I've just conquered West Earth." The young patriarch's heart trembled violently, and he cried out, "You led the army to invade West Earth. How big was the army you brought? West Earth is so huge, so how did you conquer it?" The hearts of the other cult masters also trembled violently, as they found it unbelievable. "By myself, along with the dragon Qilin and Xiong Chia, I conquered West Earth." Qin Mu smiled lightly. "West Earth has already joined Eternal Peace, but the distance from it to Middle Earth is 100,000 miles. If the whip can't reach, the Emperor can't control it, as they say. West Earth will know its place for a short period of time, but with the roads long and unpaved, as time goes on, West Earth will definitely grow chaotic. So what I want to do is to open traffic between West Earth and Middle Earth." The young patriarch and the past cult masters couldn't believe his words, and they held their foreheads while walking around. Suddenly, a previous cult master stopped and asked solemnly, "West Earth and Middle Earth have a great ruins and a flaming desert between them. The closest distance is 10,000 miles. You want to open up a road that's 100,000 miles. Not one, my plan is 2 roads. 2 avenues that have to be incomparably flat for carriages and horses to pass at the greatest speed. The fastest rider should be able to cover those 10,000 miles on a strange beast in a day and night." "Wrong," that cult master shouted out sternly. "Do you have that much money? Does Eternal Peace Empire have that much money? Paving the roads needs money and divine arts, it takes human lives. Even though my sacred cult has Heavenly Works Hall, but if you have them pave the road, then not only tons of money would be spent, many of our Heavenly Works Hall's disciples would die of exhaustion." Qin Mu shook his head. "No. When in West Earth, I've seen the roads there, and they are much more advanced than those of Eternal Peace. The divine arts of True Heaven Palace can be used to pave the road, and I have good relations with the influential families of West Earth, so I can ask True Heaven Palace Master to lead the divine arts practitioners of West Earth to pave the road. They can pave 1,000 miles in a day, so the road of 100,000 miles will only need 100 days. The cost won't be too high. The eyes of the previous cult master lit up, and he smiled. He then took a step back. The other cult masters were still circling around Qin Mu when Sai Yuanwei suddenly stopped. What about the flaming desert? It is tens of thousands of miles wide, and it's so dry that there's no water at all. If you open the roads and they get covered by sand, they will be completely useless. When that time comes, the people on the path will grow exhausted and distressed, and will die there. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor killed True Heaven Old Mother, the flaming desert went out, and only black tortoise bead is required to draw the water to irrigate the desert. Green dragon bead can be used to grow vegetation, and turn the desert into a forest. The plains on the north have snow mountains, which could be used for streams. I'll draw it from there and create lakes in the desert, solving the irrigation problem. Sai Yuanwei revealed a smile, and also backed off. Another cult master then stopped to ask, the closest path is through great ruins. It is peaceful during the day, but when night comes, monsters and the darkness invade. How will you protect the traffic? I cannot ensure it, but I can shift stone statues and gather them to defend against the darkness. There will be a town every 1,000 miles, and a city every 10,000 miles. The cities and the towns will be between the two roads for travelers to have a place to rest their feet. With these cities and towns, goods will come to and fro between West Earth, Great Ruins, and Middle Earth. As a result, trade and commerce will definitely prosper. You still haven't explained how you'll solve the issue of money. Once the roads are open and the trade and commerce come and go, the money will naturally pour in. Great Ruins isn't a level road and there are many strange and bizarre incidents. How can you level the mountains and rivers? Cut into a mountain when meeting a mountain, build a bridge when meeting a river, and pay respect to a god when meeting a god. How wide is the avenue? 108 yards wide, 8 tracks for carriages, and 4 tracks for soldiers. The width of the vehicles and horses' tracks in West Earth are different from those in Eternal Peace. How will you ensure smooth traffic on the tracks? In that case, make the tracks similar. The local conditions and customs of West Earth and Eternal Peace are different. What will you do? I'll make them the same then. The writings are different and the divine arts are different, so what will you do? In that case, spread the same writing system and open up education. Suddenly, the 28 past cult masters laughed in unison and they bowed toward Qin Mu. Cult master can also be called a saint. You are worthy of the title of the sacred cult master. We tested you on behalf of Cult Master Li, and you've passed. Qin Mu returned their greeting and said sincerely, much thanks to all the cult masters for asking me questions and enlightening me. After returning to the world of the living, I will have the way to carry out the reform. If the reform succeeds to some extent and turns the heavenly moat into thoroughfare, all of you will have the most important merit. Everyone laughed loudly and stood up. The young patriarch was also happy for them. Qin Mu had had a falling out with the past cult masters at first, but now all the grudges were wiped away. And he was glad for it. Suddenly, bird-headed god Kai Xiu's voice reached them. Cult Master Qin, King Yama wants to punish you personally. Won't you come out? This video will end here.